Hi guys, John Anderson here with Ragdoll Animation Studios. Today I'm going to show you something interesting. It's something that when I first started doing trees really frustrated me. I would go in and try to place billboards and leaf textures and sometimes actual leaf geometry by hand, and it was very tedious, and nobody had shown me this particular method. Is something that I came up with, and I know it's a common method actually, but something I came up with later on as I started to understand particle flow a little better. So this is a tree that I got off TurboSquid. I didn't model this myself. It is a free tree, so if you want, you can grab it directly off TurboSquid and use this. Use it while we go through this tutorial. I can't provide you the tree though because, like I said, it's not mine. So. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just dragging out a particle flow. And something that I want to say is the tree came in as one total geometry, one mesh, but I did separate out the smaller limbs. So these are labeled twigs up here. So we're going to go ahead and use particle flow to populate the leaves onto these twigs. And then after that, I'm going to show you a different method where you'll use Vertex Paint to decide where determine where all the leaves are going to go. So, all right, so I'm going to drag out a particle flow. So I'm going to go into my Create panel, and then I'll go to Particle Systems. I'll select PF Source. I'm just going to drag that out into the viewport. It doesn't matter where you drag it. It doesn't even matter. It is directional, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of this tutorial if you have that pointed in any specific direction. So I'm going to now go into my Modify panel, and I'm going to open up my particle view. And you're going to see that we have a standard particle flow already created for us. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of some things. We don't care about speed because the leaves are going to remain in place on the tree. Rotation is good to have. We're not going to worry about position icon because we don't want them to be positioned. We don't want the particles positioned on the icon itself. So we'll swap that out with position object. And I'm just going to, if you notice, just drag it up. And when I select over one of the previous options, one of the previous events, you'll get this red line. And what that's saying is it's just going to replace it. So if I position this over position icon, it's going to replace position icon with position object. And then in our options over here, I'm going to go ahead and select the twigs to populate on. And you can see one particle has populated so far. We don't want them to appear over time. We want them to all appear at once. So I'm going to go up to birth, and I'm going to make my emit start 0 and my emit stop 0. And you can see now we have 200 particles in there. According to this, we have 200. So I'm going to leave that for now. I'm not going to change the amount. We are going to increase this though after, but the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a plane in the viewport. So I'll go back to Create Panel, Standard Primitives, and just drag a plane out. And I'm probably going to make this 70 by 50. I want it kind of elongated plane. Let's do 65. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a leaf texture for this plane. So I'll open up my material editor by hitting M, or I could come up here and click this button right here. And I'm going to drag a material onto that plane. I'll go to my maps. I'm going to add a diffuse texture. Select bitmap. And I'm going to navigate to my textures. I have quite a few plant textures. And I'll go down to the leaves, which are way down here. And I'll select this one right here. Actually, to make it a little more interesting, maybe I'll select one of the more irregular leaves. Let's do this guy, right? Yeah, let's do this guy. Alright, so that was leaf 10. I'm going to select an opacity map with it. That's my opacity map. Show it in Viewport, and I can see my leaf there. Alright, so I want to flip this upside down, or actually flip it right side up. It's kind of upside down right now. I'm going to go ahead and click convert this to editable poly. I'm going to select the entire. Before that, I want to get rid of these segments. I don't need 4 and 4. Alright, so now I have one poly. I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, and then I'm just going to move the entire plane up so that the pivot point is down here right at the base of that leaf. So now if I rotate this leaf, it'll pivot right on the base. We could do some other things. We could give this a little tiny bit of a twist. So if I add a few connections here, I could give it a little bit of a bend. You know, that might not be too bad. Alright, that'll be fine. Alright, so then what I want to do is go back into my PF source, and I'm going to go to shape, and I'm going to do a shape instance. So I'll drag shape instance up over shape, and then I'm going to select where it says particle geometry object. I'll click where it says none, and I'll select the leaf that I just created. And now we're still seeing all these tick marks. That's just because all we have to do is change this to geometry, and now we'll be able to see the leaves. But they're pretty big for this tree. So what I want to do is go ahead and make them a lot smaller by going into shape instance. I'll set these to say 50 and see how that looks. A little better. And I'll give this a 50% variation as well. And then I think that looks pretty good. The only thing now is it's pretty sparse. It looks like you know, the tree's either dying or it's getting really close to winter. So what I'm going to do is change my birth rate. Go back into my birth event, and I'll change this to I'll raise it higher. I'm actually going to go up to 25,000 to kind of fill it out. And that looks pretty good. It's I could actually either reduce the amount of the leaves, or I can actually reduce the size of the leaves. So let's reduce the size to 40%. It's not too bad. Oops. So that looks pretty good. I think I would leave that. I don't like all of these leaves down here though, at the base of the tree. So I would want to get rid of some of those, or all of those. Maybe I'll leave some. But to get rid of that, what I want to do is go into my PF source, and I'll expand the PF source and go into subobject particle, and then I'll select some particles in here. So you can select these one at a time. I'm actually just going to select all of them. I'll leave a couple there. And now we have those selected. Now we have to get rid of the ones that are selected. They're not gone yet. You can still see that they're red there. All I have to do is select delete, and I'm auto saving right now, so I apologize for that. As soon as it's done, I'll drag a delete up into my event, and you can see it automatically deletes everything. Don't worry about that. All we have to do is come over to our properties and select set this to selected particles only. And sometimes this happens where after you've added it, the leaves will come back. So just go back into particles. Now that we have that delete in there, it's going to work just fine. Alright, so that looks pretty good. You know, this would be really difficult to get something that looks this good by trying to place these manually. And these definitely work a little better than billboards. The one thing I'll say is you'll have to go into your materials and make sure that you have two-sided checked off, because when you try to render these, if two-sided is not checked off, then you're going to see through some of these leaves. Alright, so I want to show you one other thing that you can do. I have another tree set up here. I have gone ahead and optimized this a little bit because for this, you know, the base of this tree is pretty high poly. I want to say that this is, you know, right around 1,000,000 polys, which is definitely a lot more than you should need. So I went ahead and optimized this tree here, and it doesn't have the twigs. You can see that those are missing. But I want to show you another way to distribute these leaves across. We're still going to use basically we're going to use particle flow to distribute the leaves, but we're not going to have the twigs separated in order to say, you know, to tell it where to distribute those leaves. We're actually going to go in and paint where we want the leaves populated. So I'll select this object, and then I'm going to go down, I'm going to go to my Modify panel, use my drop down, and I'm going to add a Vertex Paint. Alright, and you get this this Vertex Paint palette that pops up. A lot of times it'll have this selection checked off by default. Go over to the far left selection, Vertex Color Display, and that will allow you to see exactly what you're painting. Now, essentially what happens is the particle flow is going to recognize anything that's painted white. If it's not painted white, then it's not going to recognize it. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint the whole thing black. So we have the option over here to adjust our size. I'm not sure what the size starts at. We also have opacity over here, but I'm just going to go ahead and paint the entire, at least the center, the trunk area of the tree. I'm going to paint that black. Okay, that's pretty good. So then I'm going to go in and change this to white, and I'm going to start painting the limbs white. You make this a little smaller so I'm not messing that part up. And I haven't really played too much with the grayscale for this, but it's possible that you can fade this pretty well too. So just to see what that's like, I'm going to select a grayer color, and then I'm going to paint these bottom ones gray so that maybe we get some leaves down here, just not as much. Spin it around. We have some gray there. I'm going to paint that out black again. You don't have to be super careful with this. It doesn't affect the texture. This is just Vertex Paint. So in your texture, it'll be just fine. So that looks pretty good. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get out of our Vertex Paint. Oh, actually the one thing I want to show you is make sure that we have Vertex Color checked here. So, but other than that, we're good. So what I'm going to do now is to go back into my PF source, my particle view, and then I'm going to move the PF source 001 to the side, and I'm going to drag out a new standard particle flow. Okay. So in this case, we don't need position icon. We're going to get rid of that. We don't need speed. We'll get rid of that. We don't need shape. We're going to replace that with a shape instance. And for the shape instance, we'll select, we'll select that leaf. And then I think, where were we over here? We were at 40 and 50. So I'm just going to set the same settings. So 40 for my scale and 50 for my percent variation. All right. And our display, we're going to choose geometry. So that's all set up and should be ready to go. We only have 200. Oh, actually, well, this isn't going to matter at all because we're going to get rid of birth anyway. So we're going to actually replace birth with birth texture. So just drag it up until you see the red line over birth and replace it, and then we'll have birth texture. So our emit start and our emit stop should both be 0, right? Because we want them to appear at all the leaves to appear at the same time. And then we're going to click this where it says initialization parameters. We're going to click that, and we'll get a lot of options over in our modify panel. So our quantity of leaves is set to 10,000 to start. We want to make sure that timing, start and stop are 0. We want to make sure that where it says emission by, we want that to be set to vertex color. And we want to actually add the tree as our emitter object. Okay? And if everything looks right, which I think it does, I'm auto-saving again. So if everything is right, then all I have to do is I have to come back up here, click initialize particle emissions, and it will place the leaves wherever there's white. Now it's placing them on kind of the whitest areas. I may have to go back in and adjust that, but what I want to do is drop my whiteness where it says 99% whiteness. We'll drop that to say 50 and we'll reinitialize. And you can see that now we're starting to place leaves where there's grayer areas. Let's drop this whiteness to 30%, initialize again, and we're getting some more leaves. So that's looking, it looks different. It's definitely not as full, but we've painted a lot of this area in here black too. So it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's placing the leaves wherever we have some white or gray areas. So I'm just going to try a couple more options in here. I'll change this to 25,000, and then I'm going to drop my whiteness to 20% and initialize again. And you can see that really that's looking pretty good, honestly. I mean, it's not as full as this one, but it's just a matter of going in and painting where you want these leaves to appear. And you have a lot of control over this method. So it's completely independent of your texture. You could go in and paint out a grayscale texture so that you can use a grayscale map to determine where you want to place your leaves. But I just find that Vertex Paint works really slick, and painting a texture, especially if this tree isn't properly unwrapped, trying to go out and paint all of these different the ends of these limbs where you want the leaves to be is really a pain in the ass. So I just find that this works pretty well. Now, just to show you that that black is not going to show up in your render, I'm going to go ahead and render this out. It's a low resolution, but you'll be able to see that all of our texture is still there. You're not getting any black in the texture. It looks just fine. Alright, so I think that looks excellent. Looks perfect to me. There's one thing that's not looking quite right. I'm going to go ahead and check and see what's going on with that. But we're getting these leaves rendering down here, and I don't want them to render down there. So I'll have to figure that out, and I'll not sure why that's doing that, but I'll have to figure it out and get back with you at a different time. I'll probably just make an annotation on the YouTube video for that part. But otherwise, it looks good. So this is probably one of the simplest ways to render out all of your leaves. If you wanted to bring this over into a game engine, there are some pretty cool scripts that allow you to change PFlow into geometry. I think it's PFlow to mesh. I may even still have that in my user interface up here. So I'll have to find that and put a link in there for you as well. But if I look here, give me just a second. Somewhere it should be on ScriptSpot. So www.scriptspot.com, PFlow to mesh, PFlow Baker. That's the one that I was looking for. So PFlow Baker will allow you to take whatever is showing in the viewport. That's the key. Any of the geometry that's actually showing in the viewport, any of the geometry that's showing in the or particles that's showing in the viewport, it will convert into a mesh. So this is an option if you want to save out each of the leaves as geometry and bring those over into a game engine. You could go ahead and do that. So the option's there. Alright, so that's it for now. Come check us out at www.ragdollanimation.com or email us at info@ragdollanimation.com. Love to hear from you. Thanks a lot.